I'm Maya Sharma, 34, the lead researcher on Ocean Sentinel, a project funded by Deep Blue Industries. For years, I poured myself into building Ocean Sentinel, a network of robots and sensors designed to collect hard data from the sea. Instead of routine results, the system flagged the waters around Deep Blue's rigs as more than 5 times over the safe limit for toxic contamination. When I reported the findings, Charles Whitman, the CEO who approved the project's funding, was unmoved. He ordered me to falsify the data, to turn the work I'd built into a cover to hide the company's crimes. I refused. By the end of the day, my access was cut, my office sealed, and I was forced out of the company as if I were a traitor. They thought they'd silenced me. What Whitman didn't know was that from the start I'd built a safety mechanism into Sentinel. Whenever data is altered or blocked, the original records are automatically backed up and broadcast outward. It's not a plot. It's a scientific principle: truth must be preserved. And now the countdown has begun. They can fire me, smear my name, even try to bury the story, but they cannot stop the ocean from speaking. The control room glowed with a dim blue light from dozens of monitors. I leaned forward, my elbows resting on the desk as lines of data scrolled across the main screen. I brushed a strand of hair out of my face and whispered as if the machines could hear me. It feels like I am listening to a heartbeat. Ravi looked up from his keyboard with a grin. He was a wiry man in his 30s, always moving like his body was racing to catch up with his thoughts. Maya, you always make it sound so dramatic. These are just pressure readings and chemical levels, nothing more. I smiled without turning my gaze away. Every reading is like a nerve impulse. Together they form a body. The ocean is alive, Ravi. We just have not trained ourselves to listen yet. On the wall-sized screen, dozens of icons blinked across a map of the deep Pacific. Each one was a unit of Ocean Sentinel, the fleet of autonomous robots I had designed and built with my team. They glided silently through canyons miles below the surface, scanning, sampling, sending back whispers of a world hidden from human eyes. Ravi leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. You know, if people hear you say things like that, they will call you the ocean whisperer instead of a scientist. I would not mind, I said. Maybe they would finally understand that the ocean is more than just a place to exploit. It is a living system, a friend, a voice that has been ignored for too long. The hum of servers filled the quiet space between us. Outside, the facility stood on the edge of the coastline, half facing the restless sea and half facing the neon glow of the city. I always felt the difference like a pull inside my chest. The city was noise. The sea was a cathedral. Ravi's voice softened. Do you ever get scared about what we might find down there? I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. I am more afraid of not knowing. If we do not face the truth, the ocean will keep suffering in silence. By the time we look, it may already be dead. The door slid open. Jack Sullivan walked in, his broad frame filling the doorway. His beard was streaked with gray and his hands carried the quiet confidence of a man who had spent half his life underwater. You two still talking philosophy with the machines? Jack said with a grin. Out there the tide is rising, and in here you act like monks. I turned toward him. Not monks, caretakers. Jack chuckled, then grew serious. One of your bots brushed too close to the submersible tonight. Next time it might dent the hull. Teach them some manners. They are still learning, Ravi said. Jack crossed his arms, his grin fading. We do not have much time for them to learn. The company is pushing harder every day. More drilling, more rigs. Whitman wants your machines to prove it is all safe. That is the only reason he keeps this project going. My expression hardened. Safe for the investors, maybe. Not safe for the reefs, not safe for the dolphins, not safe for the children who will inherit what is left. Jack's eyes softened. I trust you, Maya. I just do not trust the suits running this place. A silence settled between us, broken only by the steady beeping of the monitors. To me, those sounds were like a pulse, proof that the ocean was alive and speaking. I turned back to the glowing screen, my voice barely above a whisper. The ocean has waited for centuries for someone to listen. All we ever did was take. Fish, oil, metals, roots for ships. We never asked how it was doing, but now we can, now it is speaking, and we have to decide whether we will listen. Jack shifted uneasily, his weathered face caught in the glow of the screen. Ravi typed another command and leaned back, muttering under his breath. Sometimes I wonder if the ocean really wants us to hear what it has to say. I did not look away from the data. It does not matter what we want. The truth is already here. And it will not stay buried forever. Outside, waves crashed against the shore. The night wind carried salt through the cracks of the window frames. For me, it was not just another evening at work. It was the beginning of something larger, a call from the deep that I could no longer ignore. The conference hall of Deep Blue Industries was bright and polished, all glass walls and steel beams meant to impress visitors with a sense of progress. At the far end of the long table, Charles Whitman sat with his usual posture of command. His hair was perfectly combed back, his suit a shade darker than the night outside. Beside him sat Evelyn Ross, the communications director, her expression sharp, her notebook open, every word measured. I adjusted the small microphone clipped to my jacket and stood in front of a large projection that displayed the Ocean Sentinel map. Each blinking dot represented a robot quietly working miles below the surface. I cleared my throat. Ocean Sentinel is more than a monitoring system. It is a living network. Each unit can navigate autonomously, collect samples, measure chemical changes, and track marine life activity. Together, they create a continuous record of the health of the deep ocean. Slides shifted on the screen, showing colorful charts and glowing pathways that mapped ocean currents. My voice carried calm confidence. What makes it unique is the AI coordination. These are not just probes. They communicate, they share data, they learn from one another. For the first time, we are listening to the ocean at its own scale. There was a brief silence after I finished. The board members stared, some impressed, others bored. Finally, Whitman leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "Impressive, very impressive," he said, his voice smooth but with an undertone of calculation. "Now tell us what this means for us, for Deep Blue." I hesitated. I knew what he wanted to hear but refused to give him a sales pitch. "It means we can detect early signs of pollution. We can identify fragile habitats before operations disturb them. We can measure the real cost of extraction." A murmur ran through the room. Whitman's smile did not falter, but his eyes narrowed. "Cost, that word again. Dr. Sharma, our shareholders do not like costs, they like assurances. Can your machines give us that?" I felt a flush rising in my cheeks but stood firm. "They can give us the truth. That is more valuable than any assurance." Evelyn Ross leaned forward, her pen tapping lightly against her notebook. Her voice was smooth, professional, almost gentle. "The truth is not always what the public wants, Dr. Sharma. What they need is confidence, a sense that everything is under control. That is where we come in." I turned to her sharply. "You mean spin? You want to use Ocean Sentinel as a shield while you push drilling further?" Evelyn gave a thin smile. "We want to show progress. People respect science, they trust it. If your robots tell them the water is fine, then it will be fine." The words hit me like cold water. I glanced back at the glowing dots on the screen. They were not just data points. They were my lifeline to the deep. Jack Sullivan, seated further down the table as the representative of field operations, shifted uncomfortably. His voice broke the tension. "With respect, Dr. Sharma has a point. If we start using this tech as a cover, we are gambling with more than numbers. We are gambling with ecosystems." Whitman waved a dismissive hand. "Ecosystems do not vote. Investors do. We cannot afford hesitation. The world is hungry for energy. Someone will provide it. Why not us?" My hands tightened at my sides. I forced my voice steady. "Because there will be nothing left to provide if the ocean collapses." I built Ocean Sentinel to protect, not to lie. The room grew heavy with silence. Whitman's smile faded, replaced with a thin line of irritation. He leaned forward, his words like a quiet threat. "Remember, Dr. Sharma, this is not a charity. It is a business. We appreciate your passion, but do not forget who funds your machines." I locked eyes with him, my jaw tight. For a moment it felt as though the entire ocean pressed against the glass walls of the hall, waiting to break in. Evelyn broke the silence, her tone crisp. "Perhaps we should move on to the next agenda item." The meeting continued with charts, numbers, projections. I barely heard any of it. My thoughts stayed with the blinking dots, each one a fragile voice whispering from the deep. I realized then that I and the company were standing on opposite sides of a widening trench. When the meeting ended, Ravi found me in the corridor, his laptop bag slung over one shoulder. "You did not hold back in there," he said with a nervous laugh. "I cannot," I answered, my voice low. "If I hold back, they will bury the truth." Ravi glanced around, lowering his voice. "Careful, Maya. Whitman does not forgive people who challenge him in public. And Evelyn, she can spin a story until even you would not recognize it." I exhaled, looking out at the night ocean through the glass wall. "Then I will just have to make sure the story tells itself." The sound of the waves seemed louder now, as if echoing my resolve. The next morning, I walked along the narrow pier behind the research facility. The sun had not yet risen fully and the water was a flat sheet of silver. I carried a mug of coffee that had already gone cold in my hands. The ocean always calmed me, but today there was a restless heaviness in my chest. I heard footsteps behind me. It was Dr. Lynn Tran, the marine ecologist who had joined the project 6 months earlier. Lynn was carrying a stack of printed reports, her dark hair tied back neatly, her glasses slipping down her nose. "You are up early again," Lynn said. "You really should sleep more." "I will sleep when the ocean is safe," I replied with a faint smile. Lynn raised an eyebrow. "If that is the condition, then you will never sleep again." We both laughed softly, but the humor quickly faded. Lynn held out the papers. I was looking over the last 48 hours of Sentinel data. "There are spikes of heavy metals here and here." She pointed at 2 coordinates. "Levels high enough to harm plankton. Something is happening down there." I set my mug on the railing and scanned the reports. My heart tightened. "And the company will not want to hear about it." Lynn sighed. "I know, but you cannot ignore this." Before I could answer, Jack appeared at the end of the pier, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He flicked it into the water before joining us. "I heard you both talking," Jack said. "If the Sentinels are picking up that kind of poison, it means the rigs are already leaking. I have seen it before. It starts small and then spreads like cancer." I nodded grimly. "We need to report this." Jack shook his head. "Whitman will bury it. Evelyn will dress it up with fancy words. The board will clap and carry on." Lynn looked at me, her eyes full of concern. "So what will you do?" I stared out at the horizon where the first streaks of orange touched the water. "The only thing I can do. Tell the truth." Later that day, I was summoned to Whitman's office. The room was wide and cold, decorated with expensive art pieces that seemed chosen to impress rather than inspire. Whitman sat behind his desk, Evelyn at his side with a tablet in her hands. "Dr. Sharma," Whitman began smoothly, "we have reviewed your preliminary findings. Some of your data seems concerning, but we need to be careful. Markets are fragile. Investors are easily spooked." I stood straight, hands clasped. "The readings are accurate. The contamination is real. If we ignore it, the consequences will be catastrophic." Evelyn's voice slid in, calm and calculated. "What the public needs is reassurance. They do not want complicated numbers. They want to know that everything is under control. We can present a summary that emphasizes stability." "Stability?" I snapped. "Fish are dying, coral is bleaching. That is not stability, that is collapse." Whitman's smile thinned. "You are passionate, Dr. Sharma, but passion does not pay dividends. We are not here to stir panic. We are here to deliver results." Anger rose in my throat. "The results you want are not the truth. They are lies dressed in numbers." The air grew heavy. Whitman leaned forward, his tone icy. "You work for Deep Blue. Do not forget that. This project exists because we fund it. Without us, your robots are just expensive toys rusting on the seafloor." I met his gaze without flinching. "Without the ocean, your company is nothing but dust." For a long moment no one spoke. Evelyn tapped her pen lightly against the tablet, her eyes sharp and unreadable. Finally, Whitman leaned back, waving a dismissive hand. "That will be all, Dr. Sharma. You may return to your work. We will review your data further." I turned on my heel and walked out, my pulse racing. In the corridor, I nearly collided with Ravi, who had been waiting nervously outside. "How did it go?" he asked. "They want me to lie," I said, my voice trembling with anger. Ravi's expression darkened. "I warned you, they do not want the truth. They want proof that supports their profits." I grabbed his arm. "Then we will have to make sure the truth cannot be buried." He looked at me carefully. "Maya, if you keep pushing like this, they will push back harder. Whitman is not the kind of man who forgives." I let go of his arm, my jaw set. I do not need his forgiveness. I need the ocean to survive. That night, I sat alone in the control room, the glow of the monitors reflecting in my tired eyes. The Sentinels continued to roam the abyss, quietly gathering evidence of a sickness spreading through the water. I whispered softly to myself, "If no one else will speak, then I will." The ocean on the other side of the glass windows shimmered in the moonlight, as if listening. The research vessel swayed gently on the open sea, its deck cluttered with coils of cable, metal cases, and rows of computer screens strapped down against the rocking waves. I stood near the railing, my hair pulled back against the wind, watching the cranes lower another Ocean Sentinel unit into the water. The machine slipped beneath the surface with barely a splash, vanishing into the blue. Beside me, Ravi adjusted his headset, his fingers tapping commands into a handheld console. "Unit 9 is live," he said. "Telemetry looks good. Stabilizers holding, depth sensors responding." I gave a small nod, but my eyes stayed on the ocean. "Every time one of them disappears under the surface, I feel like a part of me is going with it." Ravi smiled faintly. At least you do not have to worry about pressure crushing your bones. They are built tougher than we are. Dr. Lin Tran appeared behind us, carrying a tablet filled with fresh readings. I ran comparisons between last week's samples and today's. The contamination is spreading, faster than I thought. She pushed her glasses up her nose and lowered her voice. If this keeps up, entire fish populations will collapse in months, not years. I exhaled slowly. Then we have to move faster. The Sentinels need to cover every rig, every trench. If the company will not stop their operations, at least we can record everything. From the other side of the deck, Jack Sullivan waved as he approached. His boots thudded heavily on the metal floor, his face weathered by sun and salt. I just spoke with the rig foreman, he said. They are drilling harder than ever. Double shifts, minimal safety checks. It is like they are racing against time. They are racing against exposure, I muttered. Jack gave me a long look. Maya, you are going to have to choose. Either play their game or be ready to fight them head-on. Whitman does not tolerate rebels inside his camp. Ravi stepped in, his tone nervous but loyal. She should not have to choose between truth and her career. This project was supposed to be about protecting the ocean. Jack shook his head. Careers are what Whitman owns. The truth is the only thing he cannot control. The four of us stood together, the sea stretching endlessly around us. The sky was a sheet of gray, gulls circling overhead, their cries sharp against the wind. For a moment, I felt the weight of both worlds pressing on my shoulders, the beauty of the ocean and the ugliness of the people determined to exploit it. Later, in the control cabin, I watched the Sentinels dive deeper on the screen. Their sonar pings lit up the display like fireflies in the dark. Suddenly, one of the feeds spiked. Chemical readings climbed rapidly, painting a jagged red line across the graph. Ravi, look, I said quickly. He leaned over my shoulder. Mercury levels, off the chart. That is coming directly from the East Ridge. Lynn's face went pale as she examined the numbers. That is right where the newest rig is drilling. This is undeniable evidence. My heart pounded. We need to present this to the board immediately. Jack slammed a hand on the console. And what do you think they will do? Congratulate you? They will lock the data, bury it, and fire you for bringing it up. I met his eyes. Then at least they will know I will not stay silent. The room fell quiet except for the hum of machines. Ravi finally spoke, his voice low. Maya, I believe in what you are doing, but you need to understand, once you cross Whitman, there is no way back. I straightened, my gaze fixed on the screen filled with red warnings. There was never a way back, not from the moment we built these machines. They were never meant to protect profits. They were meant to protect life. Outside, the sea grew darker as evening approached. The Sentinels moved silently in the depths, carrying their burden of truth. On the deck, we stood together, uncertain of what would come next, but united in the knowledge that the ocean was speaking, and its voice was growing louder every day. The night was restless inside the control room. The hum of servers mixed with the faint static of radio transmissions, a rhythm that had become as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. On the wall screen, the Ocean Sentinel map pulsed with dozens of blue points. Then one point began flashing red. Ravi leaned in, his brow furrowed. That is Unit 12. Look at the chemical spike. Lead, cadmium, mercury, all three climbing at once. My hands tightened on the desk. That cannot be natural. The only explanation is discharge from the rigs. Jack stepped closer, the glow of the monitors highlighting the hard lines of his face. I told you. The pipes down there are leaking. They always leak. The company just counts on no one being able to prove it. Dr. Lin scrolled through the incoming data, her voice unsteady. This is not just a leak. These concentrations could poison an entire food chain. Plankton, fish, whales. If this spreads into the current, it will reach coastlines within weeks. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. We need to bring this to Whitman immediately. He cannot ignore numbers this clear. Ravi gave me a worried look. He can ignore anything he wants. You know that. But once you put this in front of him, you will force his hand, and he will not forgive you for it. I turned away from the screen, my voice firm. If I stay silent, I am complicit. I will not let my machines become tools for hiding destruction. The following morning, I stood in the boardroom once again, a stack of fresh reports in my hands. Whitman lounged at the head of the table, Evelyn beside him with her tablet. The other executives looked bored, sipping coffee, scrolling on their phones. I laid the papers down. Ocean Sentinel has detected severe contamination around your newest rig. These are the levels of mercury, lead, and cadmium. They exceed safe thresholds by over 500%. If drilling continues, we are risking irreversible collapse of the local ecosystem. For a moment there was silence. Then Whitman laughed softly, almost kindly. You always know how to paint the darkest picture, Dr. Sharma. Evelyn adjusted her glasses, her tone silky. Numbers can be interpreted many ways. A sudden spike may be a calibration error. The public does not need to hear alarming claims that could hurt confidence. My voice sharpened. This is not interpretation, this is fact. The sentinels do not lie. Whitman leaned forward, his eyes cold. And what do you suggest we do? Shut down operations? Lose billions in contracts? Put thousands out of work? That is not realistic. What is realistic is adjusting the narrative. Evelyn will prepare a statement that emphasizes our commitment to safety. You will support it. I felt my throat tighten with anger. I will not. I became a scientist to reveal the truth, not to bury it under press releases. Whitman's expression hardened. Careful, you may find your position here is not as secure as you think. Jack, seated near the back, spoke up. His voice carried the weight of years at sea. She is telling you what you do not want to hear, but that does not make it less true. I have seen what happens when companies ignore warnings. The ocean does not forgive. Whitman's glare snapped toward him. You are here to oversee operations, not to lecture me on forgiveness. Evelyn gave a small, cold smile. Perhaps I am simply overextended. Passion can cloud judgment. A short leave might clear my head. My hands trembled, but I held my ground. No leave will change the numbers. The contamination is real. Pretend all you want, but the ocean will not play along. Whitman slammed his hand on the table, making several executives jump. Enough, this discussion is over. You will deliver the reports we ask for, nothing more. The meeting dissolved in uneasy silence. I walked out with my heart pounding, my mind racing. Ravi caught up with me in the hallway. Maya, you cannot keep this up, he said, his voice low and urgent. They are going to make you a target. I looked at him, my face pale but determined. Then let them. If they want to fight me, they will have to fight the ocean too. That night I stood again before the monitors, watching the sentinels dive deeper into the dark. Their signals pulsed steadily, carrying evidence that could not be denied. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of machinery and my own whisper. Keep listening, keep recording. One day the world will hear you. The sea outside pressed against the glass like a living presence, vast and restless, waiting for its voice to be heard. I sat at my desk long after midnight, the only light coming from the glow of my screens. Coffee had gone cold beside me, ignored for hours. On the wall, the Ocean Sentinel display showed a web of moving lights, each robot threading silently through canyons miles below. Their signals were steady, their readings precise. The truth was piling up like a mountain, too heavy to ignore. The door creaked open. Ravi slipped inside, closing it carefully behind him. Carried his laptop under his arm, his face tired but alert. I knew I would find you here, he said softly. You have not gone home in 3 days. I did not look away from the screen. I cannot leave them alone. The sentinels are watching what no one else wants to see. Ravi set the laptop down, pulling up a chair beside me. You cannot keep burning yourself like this, but I understand why you are doing it. He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. I wanted to show you something. On the screen was a string of code, highlighted in green. My eyes widened as I recognized it. You kept it? I whispered. Ravi nodded. You wrote it years ago before Ocean Sentinel even launched, a backup protocol. I helped you refine it, remember? You called it the secret report. My heart beat faster. I thought we deleted it, too risky. I never delete anything important, Ravi said with a crooked smile. I kept it buried inside the system. If contamination exceeds a certain threshold and no corrective action is logged within 30 days, the network automatically encrypts and transmits the data to outside receivers. I leaned back, stunned. Outside receivers? Who? International watchdog groups, environmental NGOs, even a few universities. You gave it a whole list back then. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. So even if the company silences me, the truth will still get out. Ravi lowered his voice, serious now. Yes, but if Whitman discovers this, he will come after both of us. We will be finished. I shook my head. I do not care anymore. I just need the ocean to be heard. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of what Ravi had revealed settling between us. Finally, I whispered, "Thank you for not deleting it." The following morning, the tension inside the facility was thick. Whitman's shadow hung over every corridor, his orders carried through supervisors with sharp voices. Workers kept their heads down, technicians avoided eye contact. I felt the chill of isolation. On the deck, Jack joined me, squinting against the bright sun. "Word is spreading," he said quietly. "People know you are pushing back, some respect you for it, others are waiting to see how hard Whitman hits." I crossed my arms, staring at the waves. I am not here for respect. I am here for the ocean. Jack gave a low chuckle. That is why they will come for you, because they cannot buy you. Later that day, I stood before the board once more. Whitman's voice was calm but sharp as glass. Dr. Sharma, we appreciate your diligence, but enough of this alarmism. You will deliver reports that support operations. Do you understand? My throat tightened. No, Mr. Whitman, I will not. The data shows poisoning on a massive scale. If you ignore it, you are complicit in destroying the ocean. Gasps rippled through the room. Evelyn's pen froze mid-sentence. Whitman's face darkened. Then you leave me no choice. You are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Security will escort you out. The words echoed like a gavel strike. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. Jack half rose from his seat, fury on his face, but Whitman's glare silenced him. 2 guards stepped forward. I gathered my papers slowly, refusing to let my hands shake. I met Whitman's eyes. You can fire me, but you cannot fire the truth. The ocean will not stay silent. Whitman said nothing. Evelyn leaned close to him, whispering something with a faint smile. As I walked out, Ravi caught my eye from the corner of the room. He gave the faintest nod, as if to remind me of the hidden protocol, the secret safeguard. I held onto that thought like a lifeline. Outside the building, the wind carried the smell of salt and fuel. I stood on the pier, watching waves crash against the rocks. I felt the sting of betrayal, the weight of loss. But beneath it all, I also felt the steady heartbeat of the ocean. The sentinels were still out there, still listening, still recording. And when the time came, they would speak louder than any corporation could silence. The days after my dismissal felt heavy. I no longer had access to the control room, no badge to open the gates of the facility, no authority to check the incoming reports. Yet every morning I still walked to the pier, staring at the horizon where the sentinels drifted silently beneath the waves. I carried nothing in my hands but the weight of unfinished duty. One evening, Ravi found me sitting on the rocks at the shoreline. His jacket was wrinkled, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes carried urgency. He sat beside me, lowering his voice. The contamination levels are climbing faster than ever. The rigs are dumping waste openly now. Whitman thinks no one can stop him since you're gone. I closed my eyes, letting the wind whip across my face. They think they silenced me, but they forgot the sentinels are not loyal to them. They are loyal to the truth. Ravi leaned closer, whispering, "The secret protocol is awake. The threshold was crossed 3 days ago. In less than a week, unless the system records corrective action, the sentinels will transmit the full encrypted package. Every reading, every sample, every image. Straight to international watchdogs." My chest tightened. "It has already started?" "Yes," Ravi said. "They do not know yet, but once it happens, there is no undoing it." I felt a strange calm settle over me. For so long, I had carried the fight alone. Now the machines I built were carrying it for me. That same night, inside the facility, alarms blared briefly as one sentinel transmitted a hidden burst of data. Technicians scrambled, reporting network anomalies. Evelyn Ross entered the control room, heels clicking sharply against the floor. She scanned the screens, her expression unreadable. "What is this?" she demanded. One technician stammered, "We think some of the units are sending encrypted packets we cannot access." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Shut it down. Isolate the units. No transmissions leave this building." But it was too late. In the dark waters, the sentinels communicated in whispers beyond human reach. The secret protocol moved like a current, invisible yet unstoppable. 3 days later, the first headlines appeared. Laura Martinez, an investigative journalist from Global News, released an exclusive report. The article contained leaked graphs and sonar images showing massive contamination around deep blue rigs. It cited anonymous data sources from within the ocean itself. Television screens across the world lit up with breaking news banners. Environmental groups called emergency press conferences. Social media erupted with outrage. Hashtags demanding justice trended within hours. I sat in a small cafe when I saw Laura's report on a screen behind the counter. My coffee grew cold as I read the words again and again. Proof of poisoning. Proof of corporate cover-up. Proof gathered by my creation. Ravi slipped into the chair across from me. He was breathless, almost exhilarated. "It worked, Maya," the sentinels spoke. "And the world is listening." My hands trembled slightly around the mug. "This is just the beginning. Whitman will fight back. He will claim it is fake, accuse us of betrayal." "Let him," Ravi said. "The data is too detailed to dismiss. It has already been mirrored by independent labs. The more he denies, the worse he looks." That night, I returned to the shoreline. I stood alone, the waves crashing at my feet, the sky stretched wide with stars. I whispered into the wind, as if the sentinels could hear me from the depths. You kept your promise. Now the world knows. Out at sea, the machines moved silently, their signals drifting across the abyss like fireflies in the dark. The truth they carried was no longer a secret. It was a storm that had only just begun. The boardroom at Deep Blue Industries was in chaos. Screens around the room displayed news reports from every major network. Journalists repeated the same words again and again: unprecedented contamination, deliberate cover-up, whistleblower data. The company logo flickered behind anchors like a brand of shame. Charles Whitman paced at the head of the table, his polished calm now cracked with anger. His voice thundered across the room. Who did this? Who leaked it? Find them now. Evelyn Ross sat stiffly with her tablet in hand, her tone icy but controlled. The reports are too detailed to be an outside fabrication. They are coming directly from the Sentinels. Someone inside must have built a hidden channel. Whitman slammed a fist against the table. Sharma, it has to be her. Even fired, she is still haunting us. I want every trace of her code ripped apart. Shut those machines down before they bury us. Executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. One finally spoke. Mr. Whitman, the stock has already dropped 30% in 2 days. Investors are calling nonstop. If we shut down operations now, we might at least show responsibility. Whitman turned on him, eyes blazing. Shutting down is admitting guilt. We deny everything. We say the data was stolen, manipulated. Evelyn, you will craft the statement. Make it airtight. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. I can write a statement, but the tide of public opinion is shifting fast. Once the UN Environmental Council gets involved, no press release will save us. Outside the walls of the company, the story exploded. Protesters gathered in front of Deep Blue offices around the world. Banners waved, painted with whales, turtles, and angry slogans. Television crews captured images of children holding signs that read "Save Our Oceans." Laura Martinez was everywhere. On talk shows, on news panels, in live streams from the shoreline. She held up charts and sonar images with calm authority. These readings cannot be faked, she told one interviewer. The machines are still transmitting. This is a live confession from the ocean itself. Meanwhile, I stayed in the shadows, watching. I refused interviews at first, afraid of being targeted, but each day the pressure grew. Reporters camped near my apartment. Activists sent messages begging me to speak. One evening, Ravi visited me, his eyes bright with urgency. You cannot hide forever. People need to know the mind behind Ocean's Sentinel. They need to hear your voice. I shook my head. If I step forward, Whitman will drag me through the mud. He will twist my work until no one knows what to believe. Ravi leaned closer, lowering his voice. Maya, it is too late for him to control the story. The ocean already spoke. Now you need to stand beside it. If you do not, others will fill the silence with lies. My heart pounded. I thought of the sentinels, still drifting in the dark, still whispering the truth. I thought of the dolphins leaping in poisoned waters, the coral turning ghostly white. I thought of children holding protest signs in the streets. At last I whispered, then I will speak, not for me, for them. 2 days later, I appeared at a small community hall filled with activists, scientists, and cameras. Laura Martinez introduced me simply. This is Dr. Maya Sharma, the creator of Ocean's Sentinel. The room erupted in applause. I stepped to the microphone, my hands trembling, my voice steady. The ocean cannot sign contracts. It cannot vote. It cannot sue corporations for poisoning it, but it can suffer. And it is suffering. That is why I built the Sentinels, to give the ocean a voice. And now that voice has spoken, louder than any of us alone could. Flashbulbs exploded. Questions shouted from every corner. I stood firm, my chest rising with each breath. For the first time, I felt I was not carrying the burden alone. The world was listening. Night settled heavy over the Pacific as the Ocean Sentinel units continued their silent patrol. Deep below the surface, their sensors flickered and whispered across the network, carrying messages the world was only beginning to understand. Each reading was another piece of truth, another brick in the wall closing around Deep Blue Industries. Inside a cramped newsroom in New York, Laura Martinez hunched over her desk, surrounded by stacks of printouts and glowing monitors. The hum of late-night activity filled the air as she coordinated with international colleagues. A call came through her headset. She answered quickly. Laura, this is Geneva, the voice said. The UN Environmental Council has scheduled an emergency session tomorrow morning. They want to review the Sentinel data officially. Laura's pulse quickened. That means sanctions, maybe even criminal investigations. She leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her bones but adrenaline keeping her sharp. Across the world, others were working the same long hours, amplifying the voice of the ocean. Meanwhile, in a dark corner office high above the city, Charles Whitman stared out at the skyline with a glass of whiskey in his hand. Evelyn Ross stood by the window, her tablet glowing faintly. "They are turning this into a war," Whitman muttered. "A war against us." Evelyn kept her voice calm. "It is not just them. Investors are abandoning ship. Governments are demanding answers. If we do not take control now, the company will collapse." Whitman turned sharply. "Then what do you suggest?" She hesitated only a moment. "Sacrifice someone, find a scapegoat inside, claim the data was falsified by a rogue employee, shift the blame." Whitman's eyes narrowed. "Sharma, of course, she has always been the thorn." Evelyn nodded slightly. "If we accuse her of manipulating the Sentinels, some will believe it, enough to buy us time." Whitman set down his glass, his jaw tight. "Do it." The next morning, the headlines screamed with new accusations. Anonymous company sources claimed I had altered the code, faking contamination to advance my own environmental agenda. Talk shows debated whether the data was trustworthy. Some panelists defended me, others cast doubt. I watched the news from Ravi's small apartment, my face pale, my voice broke. "They are trying to erase everything, to turn my life's work into a weapon against me." Ravi slammed his hand on the table. "Let them try. The protocol is beyond their reach. The Sentinels are still transmitting. Independent labs are confirming every reading. The truth is stronger than their lies." But I felt the old fear gnaw at me. I am just one person. They are a corporation with billions. How do I fight that? A knock sounded at the door. Ravi opened it cautiously to find Laura Martinez standing there, her bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes fierce with determination. "Then you do not fight alone," Laura said. "You come with me. Speak on record, show the world your face. If you hide, they win. If you stand up, you give every child in the street a reason to keep shouting." I hesitated, then slowly nodded. That afternoon, I stood beside Laura in front of a bank of cameras. My voice was calm, every word heavy with truth. Deep Blue Industries can attack me. They can question my motives, but they cannot erase the numbers. They cannot erase the poisoned reefs or the dying fish, and they cannot erase the voice of the ocean. Across the world, people watched. Some cheered in crowded streets, some wept quietly in their homes. The tide of public opinion surged again, stronger this time, unstoppable. And far beneath the waves, the Sentinels continued their vigil, relentless and patient, carrying the evidence that no denial could wash away. The storm broke over the media like a tidal wave. Television anchors repeated my words in every language, my face appearing on front pages from New York to Tokyo. Clips of my speech spread across social networks with millions of shares. Children in classrooms held up posters of whales and dolphins with my name written across them. For the first time in my life, I felt the immensity of a world listening. But inside Deep Blue Industries, the mood was darker than ever. Charles Whitman stood at the head of a long table, his tie loosened, his face pale with exhaustion and rage. Screens behind him showed red graphs of falling stock prices. "This is a coordinated attack," he shouted. "We are under siege by activists, journalists, politicians, and all because of one scientist who refuses to stay in her lane." Evelyn Ross kept her voice calm, though her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through reports. "It is worse than you think. European governments are freezing contracts. The UN Council has requested our executives to appear at The Hague. There are rumors of criminal liability." Whitman's fist slammed the table. "We deny it all, every word. We keep drilling. The world needs our resources." Across the sea, protests grew larger. Fishing villages reported dead schools of fish washing ashore. Photographs of poisoned turtles spread across newspapers. Independent labs confirmed the Sentinel data again and again. I found myself swept into the storm. Laura guided me through interviews, each one amplifying the truth. Sitting beneath studio lights, I spoke plainly. "This is not about me. It is not even only about one company. This is about whether humanity listens when the planet screams for help." In private, I confessed my doubts to Ravi. I never wanted to be a symbol. I only wanted to build machines that could hear the ocean. Ravi smiled gently. "Sometimes symbols choose us, but you are not alone. Look outside. The world is standing with you." One evening, I attended a gathering organized by young activists at a coastal town. The hall was crowded with fishermen, students, teachers, children. When I walked in, the crowd rose in applause. A boy no older than 10 handed me a seashell, whispering, "For the ocean." My throat tightened as I took it. "Thank you," I whispered back. Meanwhile, inside Deep Blue headquarters, Evelyn watched the growing protests on her tablet. For the first time, a shadow of doubt crossed her sharp features. She murmured almost to herself, "Maybe the tide really is turning." Whitman overheard and snapped, "Do not tell me you are losing faith now. We control narratives, we always have." But his voice carried less conviction than before. Back at the shoreline, I stood on a small pier after the gathering, holding the seashell against my palm. The waves glimmered under moonlight. I whispered to the unseen sentinels below, "You gave me the courage to speak. Now the world has heard you. Do not stop. Keep watching. Keep recording. We are not finished yet." In the depths, the sentinels moved silently, carrying their data like lanterns in the dark. And above, nations prepared for what was coming, a reckoning that no press release could silence. The headquarters of Deep Blue felt like a fortress under siege. Security guards stood at every door, their radios buzzing. Protesters filled the sidewalks outside, their chants echoing up through the glass towers. Inside, the boardroom was suffocating with tension. Charles Whitman strode to the head of the table, his suit immaculate though his eyes were bloodshot. Around him, the executives looked weary, their laptops open to screens filled with red numbers. The company's stock was falling so fast that news tickers struggled to keep up. Whitman's voice was sharp as broken glass. "This is not the end. We have weathered storms before. The market always bounces back." An older board member shook his head. "Not like this. Governments are freezing our licenses. Ships are being turned away from ports. This is no longer just a public relations problem. This is survival." Evelyn Ross spoke with her usual calm, though her shoulders were stiff. "We can still try to salvage credibility. A controlled apology, promises of reform, perhaps even suspending 1 or 2 rigs temporarily. If we show good faith, we might slow the bleeding." Whitman's eyes blazed. "An apology is an admission of guilt. We are not guilty. We are providers of energy. The world needs us." But no one spoke in agreement. Silence stretched heavy across the room until Evelyn finally said, "The truth is not going away. The Sentinel data has been verified by too many independent labs. Even our own scientists cannot refute it." Whitman slammed his fist on the table so hard that coffee spilled from a cup. "Then silence them. Replace them. We cannot let one woman and her machines destroy an empire." Meanwhile, across town, I sat with Laura and Ravi in a cramped office buzzing with reporters. Phones rang constantly. Volunteers rushed in and out with fresh documents. On the wall, screens showed news anchors announcing new investigations every hour. Laura placed a hand on my shoulder. "They are cornered. The world is watching, but they will not go down quietly. You need to be ready." My voice was quiet but steady. "I have been ready since the day I built Ocean Sentinel." "This was always going to be bigger than me." Ravi leaned back, exhaustion in his eyes. "You do not understand how much you have changed things. Before, people thought the deep ocean was unreachable, silent. Now they know it has a voice." I looked at them both, then at the screen where crowds of protesters filled city streets across the world. The voice was always there. All I did was help people hear it. That night, Deep Blue's board held another emergency session. Voices clashed in the room, arguments spilling over each other. Some demanded Whitman resign. Others begged for a deal with regulators. Evelyn sat silently, her eyes on the chaos. For the first time, she felt something strange stir inside her, a sense that maybe the company she had defended for so long was rotting from the inside. Whitman raised his voice above the uproar. "We will not bow. If the world wants war, then war it will have." But outside, the chants of protesters grew louder, and across the seas, the sentinels kept transmitting. Their signals carried an undeniable truth, one that no wall of glass and steel could hold back forever. The rain poured hard against the windows of my small apartment, drumming a restless rhythm that matched my racing thoughts. I sat on the couch with my knees pulled up, staring blankly at the muted glow of the television. Every channel seemed to be about me anyway. Images of the Ocean Sentinel network, clips of protests swelling in coastal cities, children chanting slogans with my name painted on cardboard. I muted the sound days ago, but the captions still scrolled. Hero or hacker? Scientist or saboteur? My phone buzzed again on the table. Another call I would not answer. Another reporter demanding my story. Another organization asking me to stand with them. I let it buzz until it fell silent. I buried my face in my hands. I whispered into the empty room, "I never wanted this." A knock startled me. I almost ignored it, but then a familiar voice came through the door. "Maya, it is me. Please open." I stood slowly, hesitating, then unlocked the door. Laura Martinez stood there, rain dripping from her coat, her expression calm but urgent. She stepped inside without waiting for invitation, pulling off her hood. You have been hiding, Laura said softly, but you cannot hide much longer. I sighed, rubbing my temples. You do not understand. Whitman has the money, the lawyers, the influence. He can twist anything. If I put myself out there, he will destroy me. Laura's eyes were steady. He is already trying. But the difference is that you have something stronger than his money. You have the truth. And right now the world is desperate for someone to stand in front of a camera and defend that truth. I shook my head. I am just an engineer. I build machines. I do not lead movements. I do not give speeches. You gave one already, Laura reminded me. At the hall with the activists. Do you remember how they listened, how they clapped? That was not because you are a politician. It was because you spoke from your heart. People are starving for honesty. You have it. I turned away, staring out the rain-streaked window. Down on the street, a group of protesters huddled under umbrellas, their signs wet but still legible. Save the ocean, listen to Maya, stop the poison. They believe in you, Laura said gently. But they need to hear you again. Not filtered through headlines, not twisted by Whitman, from you. Before I could answer, another knock rattled the door. This time it was Ravi, drenched from the rain, carrying his laptop bag. His expression lit up when he saw both of them inside. Good, you are both here, he said. Maya, I know what you are thinking, that you cannot fight him, that you are too small, but I need you to hear me. Ocean Sentinel is not just data anymore, it is proof the planet can speak. And the planet chose you to carry its message. I shook my head, my voice breaking. I am tired, Ravi. Every time I close my eyes, I see those boardroom faces. I hear Whitman calling me a liability, Evelyn talking about spin. I feel the humiliation of being marched out by security while everyone watched. Do you know what that feels like? To be treated as if everything you have worked for means nothing? Ravi stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. I know. But I also know what it feels like to see children on the street chanting your name, to see scientists around the world validating your data. To know that for once, humanity is paying attention to the ocean because of what you built. Do not throw that away because of fear. Laura added, you are not fighting alone. I am here. Ravi is here. Activists are here. The Sentinels are still speaking. All you have to do is stand with them. My eyes filled with tears. I sank back onto the couch, covering my face. For a long time, I said nothing. The rain hammered the windows, the clock ticked. Finally, I lowered my hands and looked at them both. If I do this, there is no turning back, I whispered. Ravi crouched beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. Maya, there never was a way back, not since the moment you put the Sentinels in the water. The only question is whether you walk away and let others twist your work, or whether you take ownership and fight for it. Laura leaned forward. And think about what it means for the ocean if you walk away. Those rigs will keep drilling. The poisoning will spread. The only thing standing in the way is the voice you gave to the deep. If you do not defend it, who will? I closed my eyes, letting their words sink in. I remembered the first time I saw a sentinel dive, the thrill of watching it vanish into the abyss carrying my dreams. I remembered standing on the pier at dawn with Jack, feeling the ocean call to me. I remembered programming the secret protocol, telling Ravi that someday the machines might have to tell the truth even if I could not. When I opened my eyes again, there was steel in them. All right, I will speak, but not for me, for the ocean, for the lives depending on it. Laura exhaled in relief. Ravi smiled for the first time in days. The next morning, I walked into a crowded press hall. Cameras flashed, microphones jutted forward, reporters shouted my name. I stood at the podium, the lights glaring hot, my palms damp. I took a deep breath and began. I did not build Ocean Sentinel to fight corporations. I built it to protect the ocean, to listen where we could not listen, to see where we could not see. What it found is undeniable. Massive contamination from drilling that threatens life itself. Deep Blue Industries fired me for refusing to stay silent, but I am here to tell you the truth will not be buried. The ocean has spoken, and I will not let its voice be silenced. The room erupted in questions, but over the noise I felt something shift inside me. Fear was still there, but it no longer ruled me. I realized then that I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer just an engineer. I was a messenger. Outside, the protests swelled louder. Around the world, television audiences watched and listened. In that moment, I was not alone. I was carried by millions, and by the endless, restless sea whose heartbeat I had heard from the very beginning. The hall was packed beyond capacity. Rows of chairs filled with journalists, environmental activists, and ordinary citizens stretched to the back wall. Cameras crowded the aisles, their red recording lights blinking like restless eyes. At the center of the stage, I stood. For a moment, I felt the weight of all those gazes pressing down, but then I thought of the ocean outside, of the deep silence I had always tried to hear. That silence gave me strength. I placed my hands on the podium, steadied my breath, and spoke into the sea of microphones. I know many of you have questions. You have heard accusations that I falsified data, that I sabotaged my own project. Let me tell you clearly, I did not alter anything. Ocean Sentinel is autonomous. It records what is real, and what is real is devastating. The rigs are leaking toxins, marine life is dying. The currents are spreading poison across ecosystems. You can deny it on paper, but you cannot deny it in the water. The ocean does not lie. There was silence, then an eruption of applause. Reporters shouted over one another, cameras flashed. I lifted my voice above the noise. I stand here not as an enemy of industry, but as a witness for the ocean. For generations we have taken without asking. Now the ocean is asking us through the sentinels to stop and to listen. If we ignore it, the damage will outlive all of us. From the front row, Laura Martinez gave me a nod of encouragement. Ravi sat beside her, pride shining in his tired eyes. When the press conference ended, the room buzzed with renewed energy. Commentators called my speech powerful, unflinching, human. Clips went viral within hours. Protesters outside cheered as I emerged, chanting my name. I waved once, then quickly slipped into a waiting car with Laura and Ravi. In the back seat, I slumped, exhaustion pulling at my limbs. I feel like I just stood naked in front of the whole world, Laura smiled. That is what honesty feels like, and it is why they believe you. Ravi added, you gave the ocean a voice in there. That is all you ever wanted. But even as I spoke, across the city, Whitman and Evelyn were plotting their counterattack. Inside the glass towers of Deep Blue headquarters, the atmosphere was poisonous. Whitman paced the length of the boardroom, barking orders. She is winning the narrative, he growled. Every minute she is out there, our stock drops further. Investors are panicking. We need to cut her down. Evelyn tapped her tablet, her voice even. We have a dossier ready, old financial records, out-of-context statements, anything that paints her as reckless. We leak it to friendly outlets. Plant doubts. Make people wonder if she is as pure as she looks. Whitman's lips curled. Do it. She wants a war, she will get one. But the smear campaign fizzled almost as soon as it launched. Independent scientists stepped forward to defend me. International labs confirmed again and again that the data was real. Ordinary citizens flooded social media with stories of dead fish on their beaches, polluted water in their towns. No narrative could erase lived reality. Days later, I found myself standing before the United Nations Environmental Council in Geneva. The chamber was vast, flags from every country lining the walls, translators whispering into headsets. I felt small as I stepped up to the podium, but when I spoke, my voice carried clearly. Honorable council members, I did not come here as an activist or a politician. I came here as a scientist. I brought you the voice of the ocean. These readings are not mine alone. They belong to the sea itself. If we fail to act, we are condemning not just marine life but ourselves, because without the ocean, there is no us. The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Delegates leaned forward, taking notes. Some nodded gravely, others exchanged tense looks. For the first time, the issue was no longer a corporate scandal. It was a global reckoning. That night, back in my hotel room, I stared out at the dark waters of Lake Geneva. Ravi sat on the bed scrolling through updates, Laura typing furiously at her laptop. I whispered almost to myself, I never thought I would stand here, I never thought I would carry this far. Ravi looked up. It is not just you anymore, it is all of us. The ocean spoke, and now the world is answering. Laura closed her laptop, meeting my eyes. Tomorrow will be harder, but you are ready. You have to be, because this is not just about stopping one company. It is about changing how humanity sees the ocean forever. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, the lake stretching quiet and endless before me. I felt the pull of the deep even here, thousands of miles from the Pacific. And I whispered into the night, I will not stop, not until the ocean is safe. The official review of the Sentinel data lasted 3 days in Geneva. Teams of independent scientists, auditors, and legal experts worked late into the night. Every chart, every sonar image, every chemical reading was scrutinized. I was summoned repeatedly to answer questions. Some delegates treated me with respect, others with suspicion, but I kept my answers simple and calm. The machines do not lie, I repeated again and again. They do not care about politics or profits, they only record what is there. On the final morning, the council released its findings. In a packed press hall, the spokesperson read from a prepared statement, The Ocean Sentinel data is accurate, verified by multiple independent sources. The contamination around deep blue rigs is severe, ongoing, and the result of corporate negligence. International legal action is recommended. The room erupted in noise. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. I sat frozen in my chair, relief washing over me like a wave. Ravi gripped my arm tightly, his voice hoarse. They believed it. They finally believed it. Laura smiled wide for the first time in weeks. This is history, Vivian. You just helped bring down a giant. Across the ocean, in Deep Blue headquarters, Whitman watched the announcement on a wall of screens. His face was stone, but his clenched fists betrayed his fury. Evelyn Ross stood nearby, her expression unreadable. One executive whispered, "It is over." Whitman snapped, "Nothing is over until I say it is." But even as he spoke, phones buzzed with news of stock trading halts, contracts canceled, and subpoenas issued. The empire he had built was crumbling before his eyes. Meanwhile, public reaction around the world reached a fever pitch. Crowds filled city squares, demanding accountability. Fishermen in coastal towns joined marches alongside scientists and students. Images of dying coral reefs were plastered on giant screens in Times Square. I returned home exhausted but unbroken. One evening, I sat with Ravi, Jack, and Lynn in a quiet cafe near the harbor. The four of us had not sat together in weeks. The air was heavy with salt and hope. Jack raised a glass of water. "To the Sentinels," he said, "the little machines that spoke louder than all of us." Lynn added with a smile, "And to the woman who taught them to speak." I shook my head gently. "I only gave them ears. The ocean gave them a voice." Ravi leaned in, his tone more serious. "You know, this is just the beginning. Now that the truth is out, the question is what comes next. Governments are asking for proposals. NGOs want your guidance. You cannot step back now." My shoulders sagged with fatigue. "I never asked to lead. I only wanted to protect." Laura, who had joined us late, spoke firmly. "That is why people trust you. Leaders who seek power fail. Leaders who seek truth change the world." I fell silent, staring out at the dark water beyond the window. I thought of the Sentinels still patrolling the abyss, tirelessly recording, never resting. I felt the call again, as if the ocean itself were whispering through the glass. The next week, invitations flooded in. The Global Conservation Alliance offered me the chance to direct a new initiative deploying Sentinel networks across multiple oceans. Several universities wanted me to teach, to inspire the next generation. Even governments that once courted Deep Blue now sought my advice. I hesitated at first, overwhelmed by the sheer scale. But Ravi reminded me late one night, "This is why you built them. Not to serve a company, to serve the planet." And so, at another press conference weeks later, I announced my decision. Standing before banners of the Alliance, I said, "Ocean Sentinel will not belong to corporations anymore. It will belong to the world. Every ocean, every reef, every trench deserves protection, and together we will give the ocean the guardians it needs." The hall thundered with applause. Children waved blue flags, scientists cheered, reporters scribbled furiously. For the first time, I allowed myself to smile without hesitation. But far away, Whitman sat in a darkened office, stripped of his title, his empire under investigation. He watched me on a small television screen, his jaw clenched. Evelyn stood by the window, her expression softer than before. "She won," she said quietly. Whitman muttered, "For now." But his voice carried no conviction. The tide had turned. The courthouse in The Hague was surrounded by cameras and protest banners. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder behind barricades, their microphones pointed toward the tall glass doors where the executives of Deep Blue Industries were scheduled to appear. The trial had captured the world's attention. For many, it was not just about one company, but about whether the ocean itself could finally have justice. Inside the grand chamber, I sat quietly with Ravi and Laura. I was not a plaintiff or a lawyer, but the council had invited me as a witness. I wore a simple dark jacket, my hair tied back. I felt the weight of every gaze, but I kept my eyes fixed on the polished wood before me. Charles Whitman entered flanked by lawyers. His once flawless composure was cracked. Lines of fatigue carved his face, and his eyes darted nervously toward the crowd of journalists. Evelyn Ross followed, her expression carefully blank. She no longer looked like the sharp strategist who once defended him at every turn. The judge called the session to order. Lawyers began with long arguments, but what held the chamber was the evidence. On massive screens, data from the Sentinels lit up in charts and graphs, chemical readings spiking far beyond safe levels, images of lifeless coral gardens, video footage of dead fish floating in poisoned currents. The defense tried to argue tampering, but independent scientists testified that the machines were incorruptible. Each packet of data had been verified, mirrored in multiple labs. The ocean's testimony was undeniable. When it was my turn, I walked slowly to the stand. The room grew silent. I spoke not as an accuser, but as a witness. I built Ocean's Sentinel to listen. That is all. To listen where we could not go. The machines did not invent these poisons. They only recorded them. What they found was not my story or even my science. It was the ocean's truth, and the ocean deserves to be heard. My words were simple, but they carried like waves across the chamber. Some members of the audience wiped tears from their eyes. Even one of the judges leaned back heavily, as if the weight of my words pressed on him. Outside the courthouse, protesters cheered as updates filtered through. Chants rose, justice for the ocean, justice for life. Weeks of testimony followed. Deep Blue's lawyers fought bitterly, but every argument collapsed against the sheer volume of evidence. At last, the verdict came, guilty of environmental crimes on a global scale. The court ordered massive reparations, banned the company from operating in international waters, and referred executives for further prosecution. The news spread instantly. Stock markets shook. Environmental groups celebrated. Children danced in streets holding blue flags. For the first time, it felt like the ocean had won. That evening, I returned to the harbor where it had all begun. I stood with Ravi, Jack, and Lynn, the salty wind tugging at our clothes. The sentinels were still out there, quietly patrolling. Jack raised his rough voice. "You did it, Vivian. You gave the sea its day in court." I shook my head gently. It was never me alone. It was the ocean. It was all of us who listened. Lynn smiled, her eyes shining. "Still, you were the one who refused to give up when everyone else turned away." Ravi added softly, "And now the world knows that the deep is not silent anymore." We stood together in silence, listening to the waves crash against the pier. For me, it felt like the ocean itself was breathing easier, as if grateful. Across the world, changes began. Governments announced stricter protections. Universities rushed to teach new generations of marine scientists. Activists organized under banners that read "The Ocean Speaks." And always, at the heart of it, were the sentinels, now deployed not for profit but for protection. Far away, Whitman sat alone in a dim apartment awaiting his next hearing. The empire he had built was gone. Evelyn had resigned, her reputation scarred. The world had moved on without them. I, by contrast, had stepped into a new role I never expected. Invitations poured in for me to lead a global project to expand sentinel networks to every ocean. I hesitated, overwhelmed, but the call of the sea was stronger. Standing on that pier, watching the horizon fade into dusk, I whispered to myself, "All right, if the ocean needs me, I will answer." The waves lapped gently at the shore, like an agreement. The fight was not over, but it had turned. The announcement came on a bright morning in Lisbon, where the Global Conservation Alliance had gathered representatives from more than 50 nations. The conference hall overlooked the Atlantic, its windows filled with rolling blue waves. Flags lined the stage, and at the center I stood. I adjusted the microphone, my palms damp but my voice steady. "Today we begin something new. Ocean Sentinel will no longer serve corporations or be hidden behind closed doors. It will serve the planet. We will deploy networks across the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian, the Arctic. Every ocean deserves guardians. Every creature that calls the sea home deserves protection. And we will make sure the ocean is never voiceless again." Applause thundered through the hall. Scientists cheered, children in the gallery waved blue banners, and delegates rose to their feet. Cameras streamed my words around the world. Ravi watched from the side of the stage, pride glowing in his eyes. Jack stood beside him, his weathered hands folded, his face softened by a rare smile. Dr. Lin Tran took notes furiously, already planning the ecological studies that would accompany the expansion. After the session, I stepped outside onto the balcony. The Atlantic stretched wide before me, gulls wheeling overhead. Laura joined me, her notepad still in hand, though for once she was not scribbling. "You know what you did in there?" Laura asked. I smiled faintly. "Made a promise I hope I can keep." "No," Laura said, shaking her head. "You lit a fire. You gave the world a reason to believe we can change." I leaned on the railing, the wind tugging my hair. "It is not me. It is the ocean. I just gave it a microphone." Over the next months, the project unfolded at a pace that stunned even me. Shipyards buzzed with the construction of new Sentinel units. Research vessels departed from ports carrying crates of equipment. Teams of young scientists trained on how to monitor and interpret the signals. In Kenya, fishermen welcomed sentinel buoys that tracked illegal trawlers. In the Arctic, Inuit communities celebrated when the machines recorded melting patterns of sea ice that had long gone undocumented. In the Pacific Islands, children painted murals of sentinels as glowing guardians swimming alongside turtles and whales. I traveled constantly, speaking at universities, inspecting deployments, answering questions. At night, I collapsed into hotel beds exhausted, but whenever I saw the blue dots of the Sentinel map expanding across the globe, I felt alive. One evening in Tokyo, I joined Ravi and Lynn at a small restaurant. Steam rose from bowls of ramen, the warmth a comfort after weeks of travel. Ravi slurped his noodles noisily and grinned. "Do you realize, Vivian, you are now the head of the largest marine protection system in human history?" I laughed softly. "I realize I have not had a full night of sleep in months." Lynn leaned forward serious. "But you also realize what this means for science. For the first time, we can track ecosystems in real time. We can stop disasters before they spread. This changes everything." I nodded, my smile fading into quiet determination. Then we must not fail. The ocean cannot afford for us to fail. Back in Europe, meanwhile, the remnants of Deep Blue collapsed further. Lawsuits piled high, assets were seized, former executives vanished into obscurity. Whitman faced trial after trial, his empire reduced to ruins. Evelyn Ross eventually gave an interview admitting regret, her once flawless voice tinged with weariness. But the world was looking elsewhere now. They were looking toward the ocean, and toward me, the woman who had forced it back into the conversation. Months later, I returned home briefly. I stood once again on the pier near the old research facility where everything began. The building was shuttered now, its lights dark, its walls abandoned. But out in the water, faint signals still pulsed from the sentinels. They had never stopped their vigil. Ravi joined me, hands in his pockets. "Do you ever think about how far this has come? From this little pier to the whole world?" I smiled, my eyes on the horizon. "I think about it every day, and I think the ocean still has more to say." The wind carried the smell of salt and the cry of gulls. For the first time in a long time, I felt a deep calm. Not because the fight was over, but because I knew I was no longer fighting alone. The global project unfolded like a tide that could not be stopped. From Lisbon to Nairobi, from Mumbai to Santiago, ocean sentinel units were deployed into every sea. The blinking blue dots on the global map multiplied week after week until it resembled a constellation draped across the planet. Every dot meant another listener in the deep, another guardian carrying the ocean's story to the surface. I traveled less now. Teams of young scientists took the lead, running ships, calibrating sensors, presenting data to governments. I watched them with quiet pride, knowing the work had outgrown me. But whenever I appeared at a port or a research station, people gathered, eager to shake my hand to thank me. One afternoon in a small coastal town in Chile, schoolchildren crowded around me as I stepped off a research vessel. They carried paper models of the sentinels they had built in class, painted bright colors, each one unique. A little girl held hers up proudly. "Mine is called Guardian Azul," she said. I knelt to look at it. "That is beautiful. Do you know what it will do?" The girl nodded firmly. "It will listen to the whales." I felt tears rise in my eyes. "Yes, it will." Later that evening, I sat on the pier with Ravi, watching the sun sink into the Pacific. The water glowed orange and gold, waves rising and falling like the slow breath of a giant. "Do you ever think about the beginning?" Ravi asked. "The night you said you could hear a heartbeat in the data?" I smiled softly. "I still hear it, louder now." "Not just a heartbeat, a chorus," Ravi chuckled. "A chorus that nearly destroyed us, but also saved us." Silence stretched between us, filled with the sound of gulls and the hiss of surf. I whispered, "It was worth it, every risk, every sleepless night, because now at least the ocean is not alone." In the months that followed, results of the Sentinel project began to ripple outward. Fisheries that once collapsed showed signs of recovery. Coral reefs, long thought dead, displayed new patches of color. Pollution was caught early and stopped before spreading. Governments that once ignored warnings began to cooperate, knowing the whole world was watching. At an international summit a year later, I addressed the delegates again. I wore a simple dress, my hair loose, my voice calm and steady. The ocean is not just water. It is the lungs of the planet, the heart of our climate, the cradle of life. For too long, we treated it as endless and silent, but it was never silent. We just did not listen. Now we have learned to listen. Now we must learn to care. The hall stood in ovation. Leaders who rarely agreed on anything rose together in applause. For a moment, the divisions of nations seemed to blur, replaced by a shared understanding that the ocean connected them all. After the summit, I walked alone to the shore. I slipped off my shoes and let the waves wash over my feet. I closed my eyes and inhaled the salt air. Somewhere beneath, the sentinels drifted, their sensors humming, their signals rising silently to satellites above. I whispered, "Thank you for calling me, I will keep listening." Back home, I kept a seashell on my desk, the one given to me by the boy at the protest. Sometimes, when the world felt heavy, I lifted it to my ear. The faint echo inside reminded me of the ocean's heartbeat. Jack visited me once, his face tanned from sailing. He looked at the seashell and grinned. "Still listening to the sea, even on dry land." "Always," I replied. Dr. Lin sent me updates weekly, filled with excitement about new discoveries made possible by the Sentinel network. Ravi remained my closest ally, always reminding me to rest, always ready with a joke when the weight grew too heavy. Laura kept telling the story, ensuring the world never forgot how it began. As years passed, my name became synonymous with ocean conservation. Awards, honors, invitations poured in, but I cared little for them. What mattered most was seeing blue on the global map, knowing the ocean was guarded by 1,000 mechanical listeners, each carrying the promise I once whispered into the night. And always, I carried the same message wherever I went, simple and unshakable. The ocean is vast, but it is not invincible. It is powerful, but it is not eternal. It is beautiful, but it is not unbreakable. It is life itself, and life needs protection. We cannot take it for granted any longer. We must listen, we must care, and we must act. Standing once more on the pier where my journey began, I gazed at the endless horizon. The waves shimmered under the sun, and for the first time I felt not fear, not anger, but peace. I knew the ocean was still in danger, but I also knew it was no longer voiceless. I placed my hand over my heart and whispered my final vow. The ocean is not just a map of blue on a globe. It is the heart of life, and I will never let it stop beating. The wind carried my words out to sea, where they mingled with the steady hum of the sentinels, a promise echoing endlessly through the deep.